In today's video, low carb diets versus a ketogenic diet.
All by myself.
Hey guys, what's going on? This is Paul Revelia from Physique. Today's video is about low carb dieting versus a ketogenic diet. The reason I wanted to make this video is I've had a few questions lately about what the difference is, and it can kind of be confusing, and here's why. For years, there was a bodybuilding diet that was used by a well-known coach. He called it a ketogenic diet, when in fact this diet was very high in protein, meaning it was not a diet that invoked ketosis, okay, where the body uses ketones as fuel. So a lot of people make the association with low carb dieting as being ketogenic. That is not the case. Low carb diets are basically diets where as little as 15 to 20% of your calories come from carbs. So what I want to discuss are the major differences between the two diets and just kind of explain it in a way that makes sense for everyone. So first, let's talk about low carb dieting, kind of the history of it, where it's come and kind of where we're at now. So low carb dieting became very popular a few years back, and it came after the low fat diet fad, okay? Low carb diet was the next fad to kind of kick in because blood sugar became a big issue. A lot of noise was made about sugar in our diets, blood sugar, how that created cravings, how our society was actually getting fatter because of the carbohydrates in our diets. Versus what I actually believe is a reason, and that's that we're more sedentary than ever. However, that's a philosophical issue. So what became really popular were these low carb diets, and in particular one called the Atkins diet. A lot of people saw success with this. If you remove a macronutrient group from your diet and you create a caloric deficit, then you're going to lose weight. But the real magic here is not that you removed carbohydrates or reduce them, it's the caloric deficit. That's right. So all of these diets work based on creating a caloric deficit and allowing your body to burn more fat than it stores on a daily basis. So the low carb approach caught on for a long time. Here's the major issue with a low carb approach. Most people enjoy carbohydrates, and in fact, carbohydrates are a great source of fuel if you use them properly. Now, carbohydrates do get demonized because some of the foods that we associate with carbohydrates, such as like cake and things that have high calorie density, can create some issues with your diet. However, regular carbohydrate foods such as potato, rice, pasta, vegetables are very good for you, and carbohydrates, as we now know, are a very valuable source. So for those that preach low carb is the only way to go, well, you're wrong. It might be the only way to go for you. You see, what matters most, and I repeat this over and over in all of my videos, is finding a diet approach that's sustainable for you, all right? If you're creating a caloric deficit by restricting something that you know you're not going to be able to restrict in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, then that's not sustainable. You're only setting yourself up for body fat regain, body fat overshooting, and potentially putting yourself in a worse position than when you started your diet, leaving yourself nowhere to turn because now the only approach you know is pulling out all carbohydrates. Whereas if we practice a balanced approach, we get a much different result psychologically and long-term, okay? Sustainability, again, being the major factor. Consistency of diet being the major factor. If your diet approach is something you cannot see yourself doing in the next 5-10 years, then you probably need to change and look for a more sustainable approach. So that's low carbohydrate dieting, right? Basically, high protein, moderately high fats, very low carbohydrates. One of the issues with a low carb diet is if your carbohydrates get too low, glycogen is the fuel for the brain. And if you're in the middle of a low carb approach and you start to get brain fog, have less energy in the gym, you can actually start to break down muscle tissue for fuel, okay? That's where we get into some problems, and that's where something like the ketogenic diet approach can really help. You see, the ketogenic diet is actually very high fat, low to moderate protein, and minimal to no carbohydrates. What that does is that changes our body's way of using fuel. So with a ketogenic approach, your body switches to using ketones as fuel. This also becomes the brain's fuel. It also helps control blood sugar very well. So people on a ketogenic diet typically have more mental clarity, They also have less hunger throughout the day. And the people that I've talked to that use a ketogenic diet approach love it. However, they enjoy it because they don't mind the foods. They're able to sustain it, stay on a ketogenic approach. It's also something that requires adaptation. So if you want to use a ketogenic approach, you need to take the approach of 75% of your daily calories coming from fat to start out to get adapted. The rest of your calories are basically going to come from protein and some trace carbohydrates. Now, for those that use a ketogenic approach, you know you can start to incorporate a little bit of carbohydrates here and there. These are just general guidelines, not hard and fast rules for what you must do. But if you're more interested, I did a video with Dr. Dominic D'Agostino on my channel about ketogenic diet for bodybuilding. You can look that up. So a ketogenic approach is basically very high fat, very moderate protein. The reason we keep the protein low is because of something called gluconeogenesis. The body can actually convert protein into glucose, which prevents you from actually getting into ketosis. When you're in ketosis, you feel great. When you're not in ketosis, you feel great. When you're in the middle, when you're kind of switching back and forth between fuel sources, that's when people complain about brain fog, lethargic, headaches. Lots of things can happen if you're kind of in the middle, just like anything else. You want to pick a side. So which is better? Well, it just comes down to this. What can you see yourself doing? The people that I know that use the ketogenic approach, they love it. They tell me that they have less cravings for carbohydrates. They are able to go longer without eating. They feel very sharp mentally. There's also some metabolic benefits. There's some disease prevention and recovery benefits that I'm not going to get into here because I'm not an expert on that. But again, look for some podcasts with Dr. Dominic D'Agostino who talks about this at length. But there's a very big drawback to that, and that is lifestyle. It has to fit your lifestyle. If you enjoy carbohydrates and you plan to have them in your lifestyle, it is a big change, okay? Personally, I would love to take the ketogenic diet approach, but it does not fit my lifestyle. Someday, I will definitely try it. I will definitely get incorporated into that lifestyle. There's just too much good feedback and research on it to not give it a shot. I instead use a carbohydrate approach to dieting. When I'm dieting for fat loss, my carbohydrates are my biggest variable. And guess what? By the end of my diet, when I get super lean, I'm low carbohydrate. I'm low carbohydrate because that is the biggest variable for me to get my calories down. I like to keep my protein stable. I like to keep my fat in the 17 to 25% of my calorie intake, and my carbohydrates become my biggest variable. I do, however, use things to restore glycogen, things like refeeds, things like diet breaks, paying attention to my hormones, and using carbohydrates to help me replenish and restore to ensure that I'm able to sustain fat loss for a longer period of time. So with a low carbohydrate approach, you have some options, I feel. You can use refeed days, higher carb days. With a ketogenic diet approach, I'm not yet aware of how those things are incorporated. So there are two different approaches. Do they work? Yes, they both work. Low carbohydrate can be successful or it can be unsuccessful. Same with the ketogenic diet. What matters is that you find one that fits your lifestyle approach. You find one that allows you to be sustainable and consistent. It doesn't matter if you're 100% on 50% of the time, okay? It'd be better to be 90% on 100% of the time, okay guys? So find something that's sustainable for you. That's basically it. Low carbohydrates versus a ketogenic diet approach. If you'd like more examples of this, please let me know. And if anyone's interested in a free training guide, which has some nutrition tips, which has some training tips, how to choose a gym, please email tyler@prophysique.com. We're giving this information away. Just want to help you guys get started on your fitness journeys. If you have any questions, please let us know. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
By myself.